The year was approximately 1300 BCE. 200 years earlier, Jacob's family had arrived in Egypt as migrants. Now their descendants, 2 million strong, were fleeing from Egypt as refugees from persecution. They'd become a distinct people, the Hebrews. The one true God who had appeared to their ancestor Abraham had delivered them from slavery with an important mission: to become a holy nation, the nation of Israel. At Mount Sinai, they received the Bible, God's instruction for building a just society, but a nation also needs a home. So God instructed the Hebrews to return to the Holy Land of their ancestors, Canaan, aka the modern state of Israel, and take possession of it. 2 big questions confronted them. First one, what kind of government should they form? Strong monarchy, an oligarchy, something else? And 2, how should they take possession of a land already populated by 7 nations? Military conflicts seemed inevitable, but how could they achieve victory? Well, over the next 200 years, the Israelites would indeed conquer the land and settle it. Initially, their political system was organized along more tribal lines. Joshua, Moses' successor, wouldn't be a king, and nor would the leaders who followed him. Unlike other nations, the Israelites were led by judges, unelected, non-hereditary Bible scholars who would guide this confederation of tribes. And there were crises, some external, some self-inflicted. If the people were united, it was due to their allegiance to the judges and their loyalty to the one God. Let's call the year 1250 BCE. After wandering for 40 years, the Hebrews stood ready for the difficult tasks ahead. They really had their work cut out for them. They were ordered to conquer the Holy Land and build a holy society there. No small feat. What's more, they were now without the guidance of their great leader Moses, who had died without being able to fulfill his own dream of entering the Promised Land. Under ordinary circumstances, taking over for Moses would be an impossible task. Who could fill his shoes? Well, Joshua the son of Nun was up to it. He had the resume, chosen by God, mentored by Moses. He had led the people into battle in the wilderness and bravely stood up to his fellow tribal leaders in the incident of the spies. Joshua's message was, with God's help, we can do it. The land of Canaan was bordered by 2 great empires, Egypt and Mesopotamia, but neither ruled it. In fact, one might say that no one ruled Canaan. According to the Bible, there were 31 fortified city-states, such as Jerusalem and Jericho, controlled by various kings and divided among the 7 indigenous Canaanite tribes. As we'll see, this situation favored the invading Israelites. Meanwhile, God instructed Joshua that if he and the people faithfully kept the laws of the Bible, victory would be assured. Before sending the troops, Joshua dispatched 2 spies to the Jericho region to do some reconnaissance. The spies were discovered, but their beautiful innkeeper tipped them off and saved the mission. The Israelites' first battle was Jericho. If you could call it a battle, the soldiers didn't do much fighting. At God's instruction, they encircled the fortified city every day for 7 days, with the Ark of the Covenant and the priests blowing ram's horns at the front of the procession. On the last day, the people shouted and the city walls collapsed. Jericho was easily conquered and the city was burned. The Canaanite kings heard of Israel's victory at Jericho and vowed to fight them. However, one group, the Givonites, secretly made peace with the Israelites. That didn't sit well with the other Canaanite kings, however, and they united to attack Givon, which called to Joshua for help. Joshua's men routed the Canaanite armies because of a famous miracle that helped them. At Joshua's request, God kept the sun fixed in the sky for an entire day, that is 24 hours, so that Israel could crush its enemies. After a series of additional raids, Israel returned to its base camp at Gilgal. When the fighting had ended, they surveyed and apportioned the land among the 12 tribes. The actual settlement of Canaan would have to wait until the post-Joshua era. Under Joshua, Israel was faithful to God. Although there would be turbulent times ahead, there was no doubt that Israel's wanderings and its exile from its ancestral home had finally come to an end. Sounds like a happily ever after, right? Pack up, go home, we're good. Not so fast. Trouble still lingered ahead. According to the book of Judges, the Israelites repeatedly misstepped in the generations following Joshua's death. Too frequently, they rejected God and worshipped idols. God punished them by allowing their enemies to defeat and subjugate them. The people then cried out to God for help, and God appointed a judge to save them from their enemies. So here was the original political/religious system for the people in the land. The leaders, called judges, were to be appointed by virtue of their Bible wisdom, their righteousness, and general respected leadership abilities. Devorah was one of the greatest judges. She was the only woman to have that role, and she was also a prophetess. In fact, when you consider how rare it was to find any women in leadership roles in this early stage of history, you see how exceptional Devorah was. In her day, Israel was oppressed by Yavin, the king of Hazor. Devorah instructed her general Barak to muster troops to engage Sisera, Yavin's commander. Barak agreed to go, but only if Devorah would join him. She agreed, but reminded him that now a woman would take credit for the victory. The forces of Israel roundly defeated Sisera's forces, killing every soldier. Okay, here's where the story gets a little gruesome and needs a PG-13 rating. You may want to pause here to allow young children and puppies to leave the room. So, Sisera managed to escape from the battle and arrive at the tent of Hever the Kenite. Hever had peaceful relations with Yavin. Unfortunately for Sisera, Hever's wife Yael was at home and she was sympathetic to the Israelites. Yael pretended to welcome Sisera into her tent for some R&R. She even gave him milk and covered him with a rug. Sisera fell asleep. An opinion in the Talmud says that Yael found another way to tire him out, but we're keeping this PG. Yael took advantage of Sisera's unconscious state and drove a tent peg right through his temple. Devorah wrote a song of praise for Yael, remember a prophecy to Barak about a woman getting the credit, and recounted all of the gory details of Sisera's downfall. Devorah was known as a mother in Israel. Her military victories helped unify the tribes, and thanks to her, the Israelites enjoyed peace for 40 years. The tradition of powerful women didn't begin with Devorah. Even during the slavery in Egypt, we saw echoes of this, but her outstanding leadership at this pivotal moment was really something special. The last of the named judges was the mighty Samson. With superhuman strength, Samson could kill a lion with his bare hands. He wiped out an entire army of Philistines using nothing more than the jawbone of a donkey. But Samson had an Achilles heel, well, hair anyway. If his long locks were trimmed, he would instantly lose his strength. What's less known, however, is that Samson was a Nazir, a person who took a special vow that included not cutting your hair. Being a Nazir didn't give you unusual strength. Samson received that ability from God. But if his vow were to be violated, the gift would disappear. Samson was a tragic figure. He was obviously blessed by God and his commitment to his people was admirable, but he was also prone to anger and to making foolish decisions. Samson's downfall came as a result of his relationship with a woman named Delilah. The Philistines had bribed her to learn the secret of Samson's great strength, and she finally got him to reveal that it was all about the hair. Let's cut to the chase. Samson fell asleep, and the Philistine barbers gouged out his eyes and put him in shackles. They brought him to Gaza, where he was put to hard labor. However, Samson's instinct for revenge had its advantages. During a religious festival, the Philistines put him on display in their temple. 3,000 people attended to mock him. Samson asked to rest by leaning against a pillar. He prayed to God to have his strength back one last time, and God granted him his request. In a dramatic scene, Samson grabbed hold of the two pillars supporting the temple and cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." He pulled with all of his might and brought the building crashing down, killing everyone inside. Samson's family came to collect his corpse and bury him in his father's tomb. He had ruled Israel for 20 years. If the Yael story was graphic, there is a terrible story at the end of the book of Judges that is truly horrible in every conceivable way. It offers a graphic illustration of what can happen when a society lacks a strong central authority. The event is known as the concubine in Giva. It began when the concubine of a man from the tribe of Levi left him and returned to her father's house. The Levites set out to retrieve her and eventually persuaded her to come back with him. On the way back, they stopped in a city in the region of Benjamin known as Giva. An old man took the Levite and his concubine into his house for the night. A group of men from the town came to the old man's house and demanded he turn over his guest, the Levite, so that they could sodomize him. The old man pleaded with them and offered to give them his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine. The men wouldn't listen, and the Levite pushed his concubine out of the house. The townspeople raped and abused her all night long. In the morning, she was found dead at the entrance of the house. The Levite put her on his donkey and brought her home. Once there, he did something quite strange. He cut up her corpse into 12 pieces and sent them throughout the territory of Israel. The Levite was outraged and was sending a clear message. Something needed to be done to those responsible. The people's response was overwhelming. 400,000 fighting men, including all the leaders of the other tribes, descended upon the territory of Benjamin. All of Israel united against the town of Giva and the tribe of Benjamin. They demanded to know how such a thing could possibly happen, and for those responsible to be handed over and brought to justice. But the people of Benjamin wouldn't yield. Instead, they chose war. 26,000 men to oppose the huge force arrayed against them. Early on, Benjamin was winning. The Israelites were dismayed and asked God whether they were right to fight. God answered in the affirmative. When a society will not correct injustices in its midst, everyone is guilty. The next day, the Israelites routed the troops of Benjamin, killing 25,000 men. It didn't stop there. The other tribes vowed to ban the tribe of Benjamin and would not allow marriages with them. The dangers of not having centralized and formal leadership are summarized by the book of Judges. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did as he pleased. It's a complex statement which, at first glance, appears neutral or ambiguous. And perhaps we could say that without a central government, the people were even more responsible for their actions. The fact that this system endured for 200 years is evidence that, in many ways, it worked, and was a transition into the monarchical governing space. The return to Canaan held great promise for the exiled Israelites. They were no longer a wandering people, but one with their own land and their own God. These elements are foundational for Israel's mission of building a holy society and being a light unto the nations. But the path to gaining sovereignty in the Holy Land would be a difficult one. The people's frequent disobedience to God led to cycles of punishment and repentance in which the figure of the judge played an important role. The judges were outstanding individuals who led Israel through this challenging and formative period. Yet, for all of their merits, the judges could not unite the nation in a way that established justice, ensured domestic tranquility, provided for the common defense, promoted the general welfare, and secured the blessings of liberty, to borrow a phrase from America's founding fathers. A different model of leadership was needed, or at least had to be tried. By the end of the second millennium BCE, the populist call for a king would become deafening. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you'll know when we upload new videos.